glass of water, something that is often taken for granted, something that we ideally consume on a daily basis. This substance, water, is the key to life here on Earth, and one of the most powerful tools one can use when practicing invocation. Now, what is it that I mean when I say invocation? This is the concept of essentially calling in a spirit, there's evocation and then there's invocation. Evocation is to call a spirit outside of you, usually for a task or conversation or, gaining wisdom, something like that. Now, invocation, in my opinion, is a much more interesting process. Invocation is when you call a spirit and bring it within yourself. Now, there's many different traditions and ways of doing things. There is not one method that is the correct method. I would say there's probably, wrong ways of going about it, but that doesn't mean that there is one ultimate truth of how to go about it. In some traditions, you may find a ritual of invocation through simply just prayer, or, as I'm going to discuss here, a glass of water, or perhaps a piece of bread, or even into an object that you don't consume. Perhaps you want to put a spirit into a jar or a candle. I like water because water has the capacity to shift in its energy dramatically. It holds energy better than almost any substance on Earth. Probably better than any substance on Earth. I've heard quartz can rival it, but I don't know. I like water. Wine is also good. And that being said, we are made up of something like 90% water or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but a large percentage of us is made up of water. To further elaborate on my point, they did a study where they took different containers of water and fed it different energy, kind of like the Ghostbusters experiment. They basically would continuously tell one glass of water that it was ugly and all these mean things, and then they said all these kind things to the other one, or they would play aggressive music and then gentle music. And what they found, that the water that received the negative reinforcement or the negative charge started to decay and turn black, whereas the one that was fed a more positive charge started to form snowflakes and expand almost. So, point being is the energy that we project onto something will have an effect, for better or for worse. This is the same with people, even. If you look at a child, whatever reinforcement the child is given, it will absorb and it will form the man or the woman. So when we talk about calling in a spirit for invocation, essentially what we are doing is building the energy or the presence of that spirit or energetic structure or concept or egregore or thought form, and pushing it into something, such as a glass of water, changing its structure, changing its energetic properties, and then after the ritual is complete, consume it. And this starts an alchemical process within oneself. Because again, with evocation, we're calling something externally to sort of go out, you know. But when we invoke, we take on the energy or traits of a spirit or an angel or a demon. And that being said, it's important to understand that these are not entirely separate from us in the first place. As above, so below. As within, so without. The concept of angels or demons are out there in the universe, sort of like these energetic points. So, you know, each angel or demon or whatever sort of has its assigned energy or sort of rules over something. But they are also very deep in our psyche and most of the time unawakened. So what you're doing is you're awakening that part of yourself that has been long dormant. And you're connecting with that larger force outside of yourself. And that being said, it is all a part of, you know, the all or God or whatever you want to call it as well. So what you begin to do is form a more complete version of yourself. There are ritual processes where you will go through ranks of angels, or, you know, for example, the 72 angels of the Shem, right? These are all names, and it ultimately forms the name of God. So if you start to perform a ritual where you call in all of these names and build up into the point where you're invoking every single angel, well, essentially you're invoking the name of God. And when I say ritual, I do mean that this is something to be performed on a regular basis. And this is a more difficult task than you might think. You know, to devote the time to invoke angels or demons or whatever on a daily basis can be pretty time consuming, especially if you're sort of building on it. You might start with one of those angels and then work your way up to all 72. And to do that, you're going to want an effective formula that you understand and know. And so not everyone will entirely understand these things, but I'm talking about gnosis. When you're given certain magical formulas to exercise, you will start to gain certain understandings of them. You will gain more depth with them. And you will start to unlock understandings that weren't there. The same as when you invoke the angels or the demons or what have you. So let's say you're invoking an elemental spirit of fire. You might become very passionate, very creative, very driven. Or one of water, you might become very intuitive or very emotional, or you might start to discover things about your inner world, or being more willing to explore things about yourself that you weren't before. Earth, you might become very grounded. You might want to start spending more time outside. Air, you might take an interest in science that you never had. You'll begin to think different. You'll become much more logical. The nature of the spirit, you will begin to see within yourself. But this isn't a one and done kind of thing. You want to do this on a daily basis for an extended amount of time. Because the more, let's take for example one spirit, the more you invoke that spirit, the more of it you are going to begin to embody and understand. And so again, with this notion of, you know, us all being a part of the all, or God, or what have you, when we begin to invoke these angels, right? We are quite literally expanding ourselves. Again, forming a more complete picture, awakening aspects of ourselves that have been, you know, always there, but for the most part subdued, or we weren't conscious of them. And this will begin to expand out your energetic body, your light body, your spirit, your aura. And it will begin to strengthen it. And your understanding, your spirit, your soul, whatever, will grow closer to God or the all in that process. You will begin to understand things in a new way. You will have thoughts that you've never had. And you will have external results as well, because when you start to do that, you're going to start to operate in a very different way. The cigar keeps going out. And that being said, personally, I would recommend being very versed in invoking angels before trying to invoke demons. I know that a lot of people have, you know, there's a lot of appeal with demonic magic. And, you know, that's a very suited path for some people. But some people it's not. And I certainly would definitely want to develop my understanding and my proficiency at magic before I began invoking demons, because you can have very adverse effects. Because again, we're awakening parts within ourselves, and we are calling in external energies into our lives. And if you just go invoking or evoking demonic forces, you know, you can find some problems there. And honestly, even with the angels, you know, it's actually recommended. Israel Regarde suggested that practicing magicians have a therapist, because you have to understand what you're doing with magic in general, particularly if you're doing intense ritual work where you're doing extensive invocations. You're altering your mind. You are changing your central nervous system. You are undergoing an alchemical process where you are literally altering the way that you function, mind, body, and spirit. And so it's no light task. There's nothing harmful about this, but it is important to understand the nature of what you're doing and to take it seriously and to be responsible with it. I mean, from a psychological standpoint, even, I mean, look at psychodrama. You know, that's very much utilized in therapeutic treatment and trauma treatment and things like that. And there's quite the aspect of psychodrama in magic to perform essentially a theatrical ritual, and you know, the understanding and visualization of a spirit appearing before you or bringing it into you. You know, this has an effect on us in many ways. And so, you know, in my opinion, it's not really something to take lightly. But it is some of the greatest work we can take on in our life. And again, you know, there's many traditions and concepts of how to do this. You know, the process of invocation will differ from tradition. There's, you know, Western esoteric perspective. There's, you know, there's a voodoo perspective. There's a Santeria perspective. There's a, you know, there's a Nordic perspective. Any tradition you can think of, they have their own methods of doing this. And you will find similarities in a lot of them. Ultimately, you know, whichever tradition calls to you is the right one for you. And I think that some of the most important factors are faith, discipline, and sticking to that formula that feels right for you. One formula that I have found very effective for me, you know, is, you know, the invocation of the pentagram or the invocation of the hexagram. And this is basically a process. So pentagrams for invoking, well, you don't have to use the hexagrams. I mean, some people say you do. In my experience, you don't have to do the hexagrams for planetary energies. They will come through the pentagrams as well. But if you want to be technical about it, you would do pentagrams for invoking elemental energies and hexagrams for the planetary energies. Macrocosm, microcosm, you know, or microcosm, macrocosm. And so you would basically draw a circle of pentagrams or hexagrams around you in an energetic sense. And now there's a lot of steps to doing that that really could take on a whole video of itself, which, you know, leave in the comments if you'd like to see those videos. Because there's certain things and there's certain keys to understand about doing that to maximize the benefits of it. And I would say do it safely in some ways, because, you know, it's sort of rendered ineffective if you sort of skip steps or don't really pay attention to what you're doing. It's very important to understand the keys of visualization and vibration, and learn how to effectively move and channel raw energy. So there's a lot of steps to cover in that. But again, there's no wrong way of doing this. In a lot of traditions, it may be a simple matter of reciting a prayer. Wherever your faith is, wherever your belief is, there is power in it. I think that prayer, for example, is so often overlooked, but prayer can be a very powerful tool, especially if it's done in a devotional and ritualistic manner, and you say it with feeling and like you mean it. Because that's the whole thing with any of this, is do it and say it like you mean it. Don't just sort of stumble in the room and half-heartedly do something. You'll get as much out of magic in general, or spirituality even. You'll get as much out of it as you put into it. So, lazy efforts get lazy results. Or even sometimes problematic results, I could say. But I think that a lot of, the fear around this kind of stuff is unwarranted, because magic is often sort of demonized in the mainstream media. So everybody thinks some demon's gonna come out and fucking eat them if they do something wrong, or like you're gonna be condemned forever if you like mispronounce Adonai, or you know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't think that there's much to fear. I mean, when you get into calling in demons and things like that, that can be a bit tricky because of the essence of what you're dealing with. It's not that it's evil, but they just are what they are. It's just what they just exist, the way they exist. And so, that can be a bit tricky. But, as far as like some demon coming out of your mirror and terrorizing your family, there might be some cases where you see very like physical manifestations like that, or very physical hauntings or possessions, but possession even looks a lot different than I think people understand a lot of the time. But there are maybe some cases like that. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but it's not likely for most people practicing magic, unless you're just like going into some like malevolent shadow, but I'm not here to talk about that. The main point I want to drive home is, if you want to understand aspects of yourself in a different way, if you want to enhance aspects of yourself, if you want to deepen your consciousness, if you want to expand your consciousness, if you want to empower yourself, if you want to see the world in a new way, the process of invocation is a beautiful way to do that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely leave a like and a comment. Definitely subscribe to my Patreon for further supporting the channel. I'm going to be uploading extra content similar to this, and maybe some more instructional stuff on there as well, along with my tarot readings and all of my extended readings, what have you. So, that's a great help to me and my family. I'm a full-time artist and tarot reader and content creator. So, it's like, there's not like a day job I go to after this. This is, all of this stuff is what I do. And so, you know, I think it's important to mention that because, you know, I give this my all. And I hope that I create enjoyable and meaningful content for you all. And I hope that you get something out of it. And that's it. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.